Hey, welcome everybody.
27 now. I was born and raised in the Central Valley of California. Guaranteed acceptance into one of the universities in California. So one way that colleges try to gauge how good of a student you are is through the standardized test, although
our national document from my country, we call DOPA, and then I really wanted to see on your Okay. Yeah, I'm just gonna say, are you guys ready? Everything is fine? Okay. Jason here. No, Zoran here. Jason over there. Cool. We started. Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming, Alex. I really appreciate that. And today in my podcast, I invited my one of bestie here in the GPS school. He's one of the not kid, but wonder man of our school, so I really appreciate you come and you wanted to talk and free talk. We're gonna discuss guys a lot of things today, all the international relations, security, and then there are recent maybe recent or historical events what happened in the back in the day in geopolitical or Cold War, during the Cold War tensions, something like that. We will try to jump in everything like that. Yes, so this is our podcast of the Central Asian relations. This is already the fourth one, and welcome, my brother.
good to be here.
Yeah, thank you again. And then, oops, it's on the down now. Let me put it down. And I actually also asked all the panelists, all the interviewers in my podcast to wear our national document from my country. We call DOPA, and then I really wanted to see on your head. Let's see. It might be a little bit bigger for you. Yeah, it looks great. It looks great. Perfect. Amazing. Thank you for doing that as well. Really appreciate that. That was one of the tradition of my podcast, as my brothers to wear that for me in the podcast. And then the other one, the second tradition I keep in my podcast, like having some nice quotes from famous persons and from the books and from everywhere. So one of the best quote that I prepared is like a principle of the life. Like we can take that as a inspiration for the kids and whoever wants to study abroad or anything like that, to make their own lifestyle to be more successful. So you'll never change until you change something you do daily. The secret of your success is found in your daily routine. So this is one of the best things that I really love, and I wanted to share with all our audience here with the Central Asia and then around all the world. And yeah, by the way, the third tradition in my podcast, I also wear the national team jersey from my panelist countries. So this is the US, everybody, and we're gonna welcome our Alex from US. All right. So this is everything that I wanted to express in the intro, and then a little bit about the podcast. So it's the Central Asia, and then we try to introduce our world audience about Central Asia. This is most important thing, one of the best goal, ultimate goal that I wanted to provide, put in the front. And then the next one, again, share the experiences, what my fans got from education, the work experiences. That is the second main goal that I wanted to explore and then educate my audience with it. So now, last thing that I need to mention as well. So this podcast is being recorded in Studio 411 in the Design and Innovation Building at free resources to the UC San Diego. So University of California, San Diego, and community. So we're ready now, and stage for you, my brother. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Yeah, and then introduction about yourself,
Sure.
and then a little bit, and then we jump up to the education.
Sure. So,
Step by step.
yeah. So,
And again, this is a free talk, my brother. It's free talk. There is no censorship, I guess.
okay. Well, yeah. So I was 27 now. I was born and raised in the Central Valley of California. So I was born in a city known as Modesto, which is probably about a 6.5 to 7 hour drive north of here. Let's see. I'm the son of a police officer and I probably won't believe it when I tell you this, but a Harvard postdoctoral research fellow. My mother is a BCBA board certified behavioral analyst, and she also happens to hold a PhD in behavioral neuroscience.
Dang.
So she
I
was
didn't know
originally, she's originally from Lebanon. Came here back in 1984, and anyway, she unfortunately has never had the opportunity to go back. So not even to visit once. So after high school, I graduated in 2015, and I went off to UC Santa Barbara. I was there for 3 years. Did not enjoy my
let me
time.
stop you here. Let me stop here. So when you went to UC Barbara, right? So you went to UC Barbara, but before that, you were in the school. So
Yeah, it was when I was in high school.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
High school.
How were you there? Like how you were feeling yourself, and how you transit yourself to the next undergrad. So we know that UC graduates, not UC universities is so high level and then educationally, and then you jump in from the school, the high school, to the next level of the undergrad. So how was your feelings? How was your transitions? And just a little bit about that.
Well, I think I had an overall successful high school career. Had a 4.0 GPA upon graduating.
Wow.
Took 4 AP courses, advanced placement courses.
I can see
include
that.
AP US history, and even AP Spanish, believe it or not. And so it was, I would say in general, academically I did all right. I was also very heavily involved in running cross country and track in high school. Had a series of injuries though, stress fractures in, both of my legs actually, and that I think derailed me from going further with that in terms of running competitively. I still got a few offers. I got offers with Stanislaus State. My mother was firmly opposed to that. She actually got her master's there, knew the coach, and they tried reaching out to the coach they had in high school, trying to recruit me, and my mother, when she
Give
found
me a
out about
little
that,
bit,
got very angry.
Put like this here.
Oh, yeah.
Because I really
Okay,
can't
good to
see your face, you know.
Oh, good to go.
And my audience also wanted to see your.
Oh, good to go. Yeah,
Like
it's that.
Mhm.
So, my mother found out about Stanislaus State trying to recruit me and was firmly opposed to that. I had guaranteed acceptance to UC Santa Barbara. I got a letter from the Regents of the University of California back when I was a junior. This was late in 2013. I was told that I had guaranteed acceptance into one of the universities of California. And all I needed to do was just take the SAT. And I would...
And how was the SAT? Tell us about that. So
It was a long
I
exam.
never took that, and I know that. So if if the student also wanted to come to study in the U.S. for the undergrad, they have to take the SAT, and then
Or the ACT.
some of the universities they're not asking anymore, but some of the biggest universities they're still looking for to get some of the SAT scores from the international students as well. So I know that even local students are taking the SAT, so it means their level are coming together. I think the level of the students who's going to take this SAT is going to be almost the same with the level of the local students as well. So can you talk about that a little bit also?
Yeah, so the SAT was, I mean, it's, from what I recall, there's some math in it, some reading in it, there's an essay you have to write, they'll give you some kind of prompts, and they will score and evaluate the writing section, the math section.
You already have the 4.0 GPA from the high school, so.
Right, but the point of the SAT is, it's a standardized test because you may not necessarily know how difficult one high school is from the next. So one way that colleges try to gauge how good of a student you are is through the standardized test, although the legitimacy of the SAT has also been seriously questioned because the SAT has also, in a number of instances, been shown to not really be a strong indicator of someone's academic success when they actually go off to college, when they go off to undergrad.
Okay.
And so, anyway, I took it. I was just above average on it. It wasn't anything to write home about. The old SAT score, I believe they've changed it now. It used to be at 2,400 points, and I think the average back then was like 1,490, and I got 1,570 on it, so I was just above the mean, so, but not by much. And so it was, I mean, I did it just because I had to. And so with that being said, it wasn't a particularly enjoyable exam to take. It was very long. Obviously you can't play on your phone or anything like that, so, and it's very strictly proctored. But yeah, did it. That was December of 2014, if I recall. And anyway, went off to UC Santa Barbara after graduating. And UC Santa Barbara was a quantum leap ahead of high school. It was significantly harder than high school was. Much harder, actually. I had a cross-country coach in high school who told me that AP courses are not really college, they're advanced high school, and he was right. I would say that AP classes can definitely help you prepare for college for sure, but at the same time, yeah, undergrad was a completely different beast. There's just no, the amount of reading that you have to do, you don't get as much credit for participation. The exams are usually much harder. It's much more hit or miss. You don't have anywhere near as much room to remediate when you're an undergrad versus when you are in high school.
And I just want to remind here, this is the local student in US are talking about their education levels. So internationals, think about yourself to be prepared more than well than them, because you have to compete with them in the school. So keep in mind, when you are in the high school, do a lot of jobs. So you have to do maybe triple times what they're gonna do, because it's really important, and because you don't want to lose yourself in the undergrad level. Yeah, we can go ahead from here.
Yeah, but I remember that. I remember taking a course, one of the first courses I ever took. My very first quarter, UC Santa Barbara, back in fall of 2015, was MCDB 26, Molecular Cellular Developmental Biology 26. It was about contemporary nutrition. And I'm not a strong biologist, like a biology student. And so I remember the first midterm getting a 56% on it. The average, I think, was like a 70 in the class. I wasn't too far below the average, but it was bad. It was a shock to my system for sure. And it seemed like no matter how much I read, no matter how much I studied, I just wasn't able to do much better than that on that exam.
Was it the curve system as well during that period of time?
They did have a curve system. Yeah. Otherwise, more than half the class would have been like at a C- or lower. I mean, it was a very difficult exam.
Oh yeah.
And so, anyway, I ended up getting a B- in the class overall. I did manage to rally on the second midterm, and I did okay. I think I was right around the average on the final. Went to all the sections, took all the quizzes that we had during the sections. But it was a very, very tough exam. That class took up 80% of my time. I had that. I had a US history course. It was actually, I flew through that one. That was, I thought, fairly easy. Got an A in that. And took a writing course as well. got an A- there, and I really distinctly had a 3.4 GPA my first quarter. I ended up, after 3 years at UC Santa Barbara, ultimately got out of that at 3.68, and then when I went to study abroad at the University of Manchester over in the UK for my last year of undergrad, it's 2018, 2019.
Interesting. Why you decided to go to UK?
Part of it was to save money, because UC Santa Barbara was incredibly expensive, and to the surprise of many, you can actually save money by studying abroad. 2, I just wanted to get away from Santa Barbara, because after 3 years, I was absolutely sick and tired of Santa Barbara. I hated the school, hated the location, hated most of the people there. There were some, I mean, don't get me wrong, there were some good people. I met really good professors and TAs who later became professors who, for example, one of which wrote me a letter of recommendation so I could come here. So it's not that the entire school was a self-rotten. It's just I didn't think that for the amount of money I was having to spend to be there, that I was getting a return on my investment. Put it that way, it was overpriced. And I felt that Santa Barbara was overrated. There was a certain pretentiousness that a lot of the students there had. They thought, for example, they were so much better than the students at Cal Poly, or the students that were at the community college. And I didn't really want to be associated with that, to be honest with you. I didn't really like how they were constantly partying. They had this certain era of elitism.
This is US, my man.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. But yeah, and then just in general, I mean, undergrad doesn't really teach you a whole lot, to be honest with you. I mean, it'll give you the basics, but really as an undergrad, you are primarily just memorizing what your professor is saying. You memorize as much as you can what's in the readings, then you just spit that back out on a test. There's not really very much room for critical thinking. At least I didn't think there was when I was an undergrad in most of the courses that I took. So I mean, if you become good at picking up on patterns, as in you become good at picking up on whatever your professor wants to hear and then just giving it back to them on an exam, that helps you. That's, I think, in staunch contrast to grad school, where the impetus is much more on you to come up with a theory, with an idea, and then with a way to test it. And your professor might give you some guidance, but ultimately, it's much more on you to actually, come up with a game plan, as opposed to undergrad, where it's much more structured. It's much more, here's the way it is, here's what this person said, memorize it, and make sure to remember it for the exam. Otherwise, you'll fail the exam, right? The grad student, it's not quite that way, as I'm sure you would be good attest to, right? Because you're in this program too. But anyway, after my time in Manchester, I came back to the U.S. and I'd always wanted to join the U.S. Marines. I wanted to be a Marine from the time I was a child. That goes back to, I hinted at earlier, my mom being from Lebanon. So my mother was there during the Lebanese Civil War. That was the reality that she was born into. She grew up during that. And without spending too much time talking about my mother's background, the bottom line up front is the Israelis and the Syrians, in my view, are largely responsible for the destruction of Lebanon. Started with the Israelis. They funneled money and weapons to a political party called the Kataib, or the Phalange Party, which is it was an offshoot of the Nazi Party. It was quite literally modeled after the German Nazi Party.
What time are we talking about?
1975 when the war started. And so, but from 1951 and onwards, the government of Israel had been sending money, and then later throughout the 60s, they sent weapons to the Phalange Party to help them form a private militia. And they wanted to turn Lebanon into a Maronite Christian ethno-state. So as more Palestinians ended up in Lebanon, first after the Nakba in 1948, and then after King Hussein of Jordan cracked down on them and kicked them out of Jordan in 1970, Lebanon became the headquarters of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, then under Yasser Arafat. So the Phalange did not like the influx of Palestinian refugees. They felt that was threatening the very delicate demographic balance within Lebanon.
Immigration crisis.
They felt that there were too many Muslims or just too many non-Christians in general in Lebanon.
Lebanon already had the system of three directions, right? Like a Christian should be prime minister, I don't remember, and the Muslim should be president.
So the president always has to be a Maronite Christian. The prime minister always has to be a Sunni Muslim, and then the speaker of parliament always has to be Shia. But see, the Phalange Party wanted to have everything controlled by Christians, and the military.
They exactly didn't want to have that.
Yeah, they didn't
want in the society, because the number of the population that's gonna define the places in the Senate, I don't know, in the presidency or in different places.
Yeah, so they wanted to take over all of Lebanon's government. They didn't want just the president to be a Christian. They wanted the Speaker of Parliament and the Prime Minister and everybody in the military to all be Maronite Christians. And the idea is that everybody else who's there, all the non-Christians, they can stay there, but they can't be a political or military force. Everything they do is governed by the Christians. So they wanted to create a Maronite Christian ethno-state out of Lebanon. And this idea came to them, was introduced to them by the French when they colonized Lebanon after World War I. It recruited Maronites into the police and into the military. And this is why many of Lebanon's early presidents, like Emil Shamoun or Fouad Shihab or Charles Halou, like this is why they have these French-sounding names. Pierre Gemayel, the founder of the Kataib, they all had these French-sounding names for a reason. They were educated in French schools, and they adopted French ways. And so after the French left, the Maronites felt that they were the ones who rightfully were destined to govern Lebanon.
Yeah.
So, and the Israelis contributed to this. And that is ultimately what started the civil war. The Palestinians, contrary to what many might think, were not trying to take over Lebanon's government. They were just trying to go back to where they came from. And most of Lebanon agreed with that and wanted to help them. And so then when Salman Fanjeh was the president of Lebanon, he very controversially invited his old friend Hafez al-Assad to help him kill Palestinians in the siege of Tel Zatar.
Mm-hmm.
But by inviting Assad into Lebanon, that caused a rift in the Maronite community. And this is what led to Bashir Gemayel, the founder of, or the son of the party's founder. It's what led to him killing Salman Fanjeh's family in 1978, what became known as the Aden massacre. And now you've got the Phalange fighting the Syrians, while the Palestinians are trying to fight the Israelis. And as the Palestinians were primarily in South Lebanon fighting the Israelis ultimately blitzed Lebanon in 1982 in what they called Operation Peace for Galilee, and completely knocked out the power supply in Beirut, cut off access to running water, and they basically gave Lebanon an ultimatum. They basically told Lebanon, you either stand with us, stand with the Phalange, or you stand with the Palestinians, and you're going to be obliterated, basically. And we will do what we need to defend ourselves, was the rhetoric that they gave the people of Lebanon. So my mom grew up in the middle of this. And for, I guess, a little bit of additional context, my mother was by no means a fan of either side of that. She, for example, did not like the Syrians. She did not like the Israelis, and she came from a mixed background. My grandmother, Antoine Malouhi, she was the voice of Sinbad. So there was a cartoon in Lebanon back in 1975 called Arabian Nights, Sinbad's Adventures. Mm-hmm. And it was a very well-known cartoon. Everybody in Lebanon would know about Sinbad. And my grandmother did the dubs in Arabic for Sinbad. So she was a celebrity in Lebanon back in those days. And so she was Christian, but my grandfather was Muslim. And so technically that's what my mom was. But she was raised mainly by my grandmother because my grandparents divorced when my mom was 2 years old. And so, again, trying to move along with the story here, but the point is the Phalange party, after my grandmother criticized the Phalange, they tried to kill my mom and both of her brothers back in 1977, I believe that was. My mom was about 7 years old. And they obviously missed, otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But yeah, with Israeli weapons, like Galil rifles, there was a speeding vehicle that they opened fire on. My grandfather, when he found out that the Phalange controlled the boarding school that my mom and her brothers were at, and that they were looking for my mom and her brothers, he had a cousin in the Lebanese army who found a driver to get my mom out of Jounieh, which is north of Beirut, and was controlled by the Phalange. And he needed a driver to get them down south to where my grandmother had relocated. And anyway, it was, so it was a very scary time. She didn't have paperwork to say that she was Christian, so when she was passing by this checkpoint that was controlled by the Phalange, her paperwork said that she and her brothers were Muslims, and that was it. That was enough for the Phalange to open fire on the car when the driver of the vehicle floored it, ran through the vehicle, barricade the arm, or whatever you call it. Like you press a button and like the stick, it's like a stick that comes up. Anyway, he just drove straight through that, and he made a hard right turn, went off-road, and the Phalange opened fire on the car that they were in. And my mom said that, and my uncle both said that you could hear bullets whizzing past the car, a few hitting the bumper in the trunk. But ultimately that driver threw them off, and my mom doesn't know what happened to that very heroic driver. But anyway, there's that. Then when she was down and near the Sabra and Shatila, which later became the site of a horrific massacre, the Syrians were again still aggressively pursuing Palestinians, and so I remember getting hit by a mortar round that left her hospitalized. I mean, she didn't have any serious injuries. She was far enough away from it to where it didn't break any bones or take off any of her limbs or anything like that. But it did make her ears bleed.
Yeah.
So bleed out of her ears because of the sheer shock, I guess, of the round. So that was my mom's reality, and the Lebanese government was not strong enough to push either the Israelis or the Syrians out of Lebanon. And the people of Lebanon were largely uncooperative. They were much more interested in feudal politics, even within religious sects, than they were in unifying and actually, having a clear definition of what it meant to be Lebanese. So President Elias Sarkis, when he was president of Lebanon, ultimately requested the help of the United States in solving that mess. And so when the Marines deployed to Lebanon and oversaw the evacuation of the PLO, no issues there. The Israelis consistently tried to block that evacuation. As soon as the Marines left, the Israelis orchestrated a rather horrific event known as Sabra Shatila that I alluded to earlier. They beat to death, raped approximately 3,000 people, most of which were women and children. And so these were unarmed people. The PLO had laid on their arms, they left, they relocated to Tunisia. The government of Tunisia had agreed to host the PLO. So anyway, the Marines had to come back to Lebanon as a result of Sabra and Shatila. They were then shot at, cussed out, and harassed repeatedly by the Israelis. In fact, the commandant of the Marine Corps even wrote a scathing letter condemning the antics of Israeli troops back in March of 1983. President Reagan ignored that letter, and instead actually was in the background quietly funneling weapons to Osama bin Laden, to Saddam Hussein, and to the Saudis, all of which were staunchly anti-Shia, were slaughtering Shias, arbitrarily detaining them, punishing them. Obviously, and this is what pissed off Iran and made them want to come after the U.S. And yeah, to really add to the irony, Ronald Reagan and the Israelis were also quietly funneling weapons to the government of Iran as well, because in the case of Reagan, he wanted someone to fight. It was a futile attempt to get hostages back, but he also wanted someone to contain the Soviet Union's influence in Iran, because the IRGC was staunchly opposed to the Soviet Union, or at least to Marxism, because Marxism, for example, is atheistic, and good luck selling that in the Middle East. And so then, of course, for the Israelis, they just wanted someone to fight Saddam Hussein, because he was invading Iran back in the 80s, and he had also been supplying the Palestinians, and the Israelis knew it, but they were not strong enough to actually take him on. So they said, here, Iran, we'll sell you TOW missiles if you agree to fire them on Saddam Hussein. But they also knew that the Iranians were coming after the Marines. The Iranians blew up the U.S. Embassy on April 18th of 1983. They were supporting Assad as he was firing on, shooting at, and essentially reconnoitering the Marine Corps' positions in and around the Beirut International Airport. And on October 23rd of 1983, the Iranians...
1983, 1 second, I'm going to stop you here. So we were talking about 1983, I think. Right? Yeah, okay. And we go from there again? Yeah. And by the way, the history, the story that connected the real background story, it was very, very amazing. Even if we want to connect that to the current events, what happened from 1960, let's say 1952, until the current, what happening in the Israel-Palestine situation, we can completely put dot to dot to connect them to each other, because it's really related to what you were talking about. And thanks for sharing that amazing stories. And yeah, we were stopped in the 1983, and then we go from here.
Yep, so October 23rd, 1983 at 6 in the morning. It was a suicide bomber that was funded and armed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps that bombed the Marine Corps barracks, killed 220 Marines, 18 naval corpsmen, 3 U.S. Army soldiers, and 6 Lebanese civilians. And so anyway, my mother was maybe, I don't know, half a mile away or so from the barracks when it was hit. My mother remembers seeing the smoke and what she considered Lebanon's final hope, quite literally going up in smoke. So the Israelis, according to Victor Ostrovsky, who was a Mossad agent at that time, he actually wrote a book about this called The Way of Deception, and in that book, he alleges that the Israelis knew that the barracks were going to get hit. They saw the car bomb, but deliberately stayed quiet about it. And Victor Ostrovsky argues that this was one of the events that led to him breaking away from Mossad and speaking out, because he felt it was bad. He's like, hey, the Americans came here in good faith. Why aren't we telling them? Like, why are we staying quiet about this and just letting them die in such horrific fashion? And, well, because the Marines had criticized, to include a 4-star general, had criticized the Israelis wanted to retaliate. So they were quietly funneling tow missiles, for example, to Iran. The CIA even has declassified documents admitting this. And that kind of goes into what we're seeing today, the fact that the Israelis can get away with facilitating the annihilation of U.S. troops. To be clear, it was the Iranians that bombed the barracks, but who was giving the Iranians the bombs to do that with? Well, it was the Israelis, ironically. The Iranians, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, is a monster that's largely of their own creation. And anyway, with that being said, I mean, especially too, you consider that they were funding weapons to literal neo-Nazis who, even apart from attacking Palestinians, also marginalized Lebanon's Jewish community. It really calls into question why the U.S. supports Israel so much. And we look at what's happening today, right? The ethnic cleansing of Palestine, and it feels like nothing has changed. Saddam left Lebanon 40 years ago. And so with that being the case, that's the current situation at hand. That's how it all, I think, kind of ties together. Until the Israelis are held accountable, there's never going to be any peace in that region. So, I mean, Iran, they commit their own share of human rights abuses, beating their women, persecuting Kurds, persecuting Persian Sunnis, persecuting the Baha'i. There's plenty of room to criticize the Iranian government. And yet, they get sanctioned and periodically bombed by the United States, as do their proxies. We have amphibious warships firing on Yemen as we speak. That's after 8 years of Saudi-led intervention in Yemen that killed, roughly 400,000 Yemeni Shias. So if we wonder why Iran hates us or why the Shias in Yemen hate us so much, it's like, well, maybe we should look at what we did to them. But that conversation seldom comes up in political discourse in the U.S. The U.S. is strictly fighting for corporate interests and not for humanitarian ideals, and that's what largely brought me here to GPS, because I wanted to do something about it. So when I was on active duty with the Marine Corps, so joined the Marine Corps in January 2020. I was part of Officer Candidate Class 233. Went from there to the basic school, was at TBS, given that was also during COVID times. And so anyway, I was ultimately at TBS in Camp Baird for a year and some change, about 15 months. And part of that was because of an injury that I suffered in the first training company that I was in. And then part of that was just because of COVID. There was a backlog in terms of sending people to MOS school. And so anyway, July 2021, I went to Camp Lejeune, which is where the Beirut Memorial is located. And I was there for the logistics officer course, because I was designated in 0402, which is the MOS for logistics. So from there, checked in briefly to 5th Battalion, 14th Marines, my reserve unit. I was there for 2 drills before I had to turn around and drive all the way back across the country to activate for a year for a personal development tour with the Marine Raider Regiment, which is part of Marine Forces Special Operations Command. So to be clear, I wasn't an operator, but I was overseeing the procurement, the acquisition, and the maintenance, calibration, and modification of about $550 million worth of Marine Corps and SOCOM assets that were deploying with Marine Raiders across 4 geographic event commands. So it was a huge assignment, and still not entirely sure how I, of all people, got selected for it, but I was very grateful for that opportunity. And initially I did think I wanted to be a career Marine, just active duty full-time. I never thought about going back to grad school. I hated school. I had advisors, mentors when I was an undergrad who said, hey, you're a good student, you should go to grad school. And I said, hey, I hate it here, I never want to go. But then just seeing things unfold. I mean, you can become, for example, a 4-star general and criticize something that civilian leadership does, and you still ultimately have to salute, double-time, bout-face, and carry out those orders, or they get rid of you and then they retaliate.
Yes.
So just like Reagan, I would argue, did in the context of Lebanon, or more recently in history, George Bush Jr. and Iraq. There were General Zinni, Lieutenant General Van Riper, Lieutenant General Newbold, and many others that stood up and said, hey, the Iraq War is a scam. There are no WMDs here. Saddam Hussein was not part of 9/11.
Yeah,
this is
there's
going to be
no WMDs.
Right.
Different part of the story.
right.
There.
That ties into I think Central Asia, in the sense that the U.S. has developed, has tried to develop and foster relationships with, for example, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, largely to in an effort to contain the spread of Al Qaeda.
I think it was before that, even 2001, so 9/11. So after 9/11 happened, George Bush reached to our country and the president, the fifth president of the Islam Korean Oxford, and U.S. eventually got 2 spots for airspace to use the airdromes in Uzbekistan and then in Kyrgyzstan to move their air, the airdromes and then air bases to these 2 countries to have use them during the war against Al Qaeda. Yeah, that's true.
And so, yeah, the U.S. still has, I think, vested interests in certainly maintaining some kind of presence in Central Asia, mainly to counter, I think, the rise of China, and to sort of keep the Central Asian states on their side and on China's side. Because the idea is that if they have a base in, say, Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan, that would, in theory, deter China from attempting to establish their own base in, say, Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, because that might lead to confrontation. So, and I think it's all, again, as with everything with U.S. foreign policy, it's about advancing corporate interest. So in the case of Iraq, they wanted the oil. In the case of, say, just briefly touching on China, when it comes to defending Taiwan, is it really about the human rights of the people of Taiwan? No, it's about the microchips. Taiwan is the world's leading producer in microchips. So Apple, Microsoft, Google, they lobby heavily. They lobby both Republicans and Democrats in every single election cycle. And that is in large part because they want to make sure that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't take over Taiwan, because if they do, then in theory they could seize the microchip manufacturing industry in Taiwan, and then take those profits and distribute them how they see fit, not how the boards of Apple, Microsoft, and Google do. So,
and what do you think? So the Central Asia, the whole total region, it's landlocked region. It's not close to the past, like close to any ocean. So from the north there's Russia is coming. From the south is the India over there with the Pakistan or Afghanistan, Iran. From the south, so and from the east there is the China. So how the U.S. can see their own like a relationship or interest during that region? Like what can they? What can do they? So about the making like closest relationship to Central Asia and to have some friendship relationship, like maybe on education, on building democracies, or some or like economic like a relationship to help the Central Asian regions to grow their own economy faster. And there is a climate also, the biggest issue is coming up, and there is our Aral Sea is completely dried out, so that is also one of the climate issues that what the Central Asia currently having issue like facing that. And then the biggest issue that Uzbekistan facing nowadays is the energy problems. So what I know that currently the World Bank, the international multilateral institutions are really tied deeply together with working with Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan and other regions of the Central Asia, and in like World Bank, IMF, International Monetary Fund, and then the WTO, so World Trade Organization. They really try to tie it together to help those regions to develop their economy and well-being nowadays. To help the region to transition from their the level of developing to the next stage. So, what would be your thoughts on that? Like, how the U.S. can find any relationship or interest or anything like how you described, like yeah, something like that. think about it.
I'm not aware, off the top of my head, of what the natural resources are in, say, Uzbekistan or in Kazakhstan or Tajikistan or Kyrgyzstan. I'm sure there are some natural resources. I just can't think of them off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know they're not, for example, oil rich, like say a lot of the states.
Yes.
But even still, it's as China, for example, has their Belt and Road Initiative, as they, for example, are establishing ties with Brazil or ties with South Africa or with Sri Lanka.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to spread out their reach and essentially prop themselves up as the vanguards of the global South, essentially, to challenge the U.S. hegemony. And so, with that being said, the United States then is looking to send foreign aid to essentially whoever can accept it or will accept it, because they, as much as possible, want to build alliances and partnerships and be able to establish bases to prevent China from establishing its reach. So I think that's the biggest impetus for the United States to have a base in Uzbekistan.
And what gives the U.S. this?
Gives the U.S. this? What do you mean?
Like, what gives the U.S. to doing that?
What gives the U.S. to do
what is the interest?
Oh, the interest.
Yeah.
Like I said, containing the spread of China. They don't want, if they, let's say, abandon Uzbekistan, have no relationship. Uzbekistan
And we're
is looking
talking
for
about the
energy.
geopolitics.
Right, then Uzbekistan might reestablish ties with, say, Russia, which is another key adversary of the U.S., or with China. The U.S. doesn't want that, so they're thinking, okay, how do we get the Uzbeks on our side?
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, maybe we can send them some money and kind of buy their support.
Yeah.
I mean, the U.S. does this. They send foreign aid.
Yeah.
They have a whole list of countries doing. It's not like it's some genuine humanitarian concern. No, it's they're doing it because they have an interest. So like, hey, we want to spread. We want to continue to have a foothold around the world. We want U.S. hegemony to continue because we have corporate interests that we want to protect. And so, if they see China as a threat to that, then now they're going to look wherever they can to establish ties with states that, like I said, will be willing to work with the United States.
All right. And again, thank you so much for having the really good podcast and discussion with me, to sharing your real world background and real story, what your family faced with, and then your own story on the educational sphere, and then you shared a lot of advices to the all around the world, like who wants to study in the U.S. or internationally, even here. And I think we described the current international relations as well very well, like from the background of your knowledge. That is also one of the great things that what we did today. And then at the same time, we connected that to the Central Asia region. What would be in the geopolitical changes? What would be the Central Asians' place? How they gonna play the role in current changes in the big, like wing changes? How the Central Asia should play their role to affect in current changes in the overall geopolitical, like happen events in the current world. And thank you so much, and again, for coming, Alex. I appreciate that, and have a good one. Have a great rest of your weekend or time, anything like that. And then, yeah, thank you guys. Thank you everybody. Thank you. We're done here, right?